Ethan Cole was a man who lived with silence. His home was a large ranch nestled in the rolling hills of Montana, a place of wide open skies and endless fields where the loudest sound was usually the wind whispering through the grass. He had a few horses for work and an old dog named Buddy, who slept on the porch. Ethan liked it this way. He found comfort in the quiet routines of his day, feeding the animals, mending fences, and eating his supper alone as the sun set. He had lived by himself for so long that he had forgotten what any other kind of life sounded like. One evening in late autumn, the sky began to change. What started as a gentle breeze quickly grew into a howling wind. Dark, heavy clouds rolled in, swallowing the last of the daylight. Soon, rain began to fall, not a soft sprinkle, but a hard, angry downpour that hammered against the roof of the ranch house. Lightning flashed, illuminating the entire valley for a split second, and thunder boomed so loudly it shook the windows. Ethan was just about to bank the fire in his stone fireplace and go to bed, thinking the storm was a good excuse for an early night. He loved the sound of rain on the roof when he was safe and warm inside, just as he was turning down his lamp. A new sound cut through the noise of the storm. It was not the wind or the thunder. It was the distinct, desperate blare of a car horn, followed by a terrible crunch of metal and a splash. The sound came from the direction of the old dirt road that ran along the edge of his property. Someone was out there in this terrible weather, and they were in trouble. Ethan did not hesitate. He pulled on his heavy boots and his thick, waxed coat, grabbed a powerful lantern, and plunged out into the storm. The wind tried to push him over, and the rain stung his face. He trudged through the mud, following the sound of the horn that was now honking in short, panicked bursts. His lantern light swung wildly, cutting a shaky path through the darkness. Finally, he reached the road. There, tilted at a dangerous angle in a deep ditch filled with muddy water, was a small blue car. Its front wheels were buried, and steam was rising from the engine. The horn was still sounding from inside. Ethan sloshed through the water and mud to the driver's side window. Peering inside, he saw 3 women. One was frantically pressing the horn, another was clutching the seat in front of her, and the third was trying to calm them both down. They all looked terrified and soaked, even inside the car. He knocked on the window. The woman at the wheel jumped, then quickly rolled the window down a crack. Thank goodness. She yelled over the storm. We hit a patch of mud and slid right off the road. We can't get out. Are any of you hurt? Ethan asked, his voice a low rumble. We're shaken up, but we're okay, the woman replied. She had fiery red hair that was coming loose from its braid, and eyes that were sharp even in her fear. The other 2 women looked at him, their faces pale and worried. One had a very kind face and soft brown hair, and the youngest had a mischievous look about her, though now she just looked cold and scared. Ethan looked at the car, then back at his dark ranch house in the distance. The road was flooded, and no one would be coming to help tonight. He knew what he had to do, even though the idea of having 3 strangers in his quiet home made him want to sigh. His plans for a peaceful sleep were completely ruined. The road is washed out, he said finally. You cannot stay here. You will have to come back to my ranch and wait out the storm there. The three sisters looked at each other, then back at him. The redhead nodded. "Thank you. We appreciate your kindness." One by one, they climbed out of the car and into the pouring rain. Ethan helped them, his big hand steadying them as they slipped in the mud. He led the way back to his house, the beam of his lantern guiding them through the darkness. The three strangers followed him, a line of shivering, unexpected guests. He held the door open for them, and they hurried inside, dripping water all over his clean floor. The quiet of his home was instantly replaced by the sound of their chattering teeth and nervous laughter. Ethan closed the door, shutting out the storm, but welcoming in a different kind of whirlwind. All he had wanted was one good night's sleep. But it seemed the three sisters had other plans. The moment the three sisters stepped across his threshold, the familiar silence of Ethan's home vanished. It was not a slow fading away. It was a sudden and complete extinction, like a candle flame being pinched out. The world outside was a roaring monster of wind and water, but inside a new kind of storm began to brew, one made of voices and movement, and life. Ethan stood for a moment, a little stunned, watching water drip from their coats and form small puddles on the wooden floor he had swept just that morning. The red-haired sister, Clara, took charge immediately. She shooed her sisters further into the room and began peeling off her wet jacket with efficient movements. "We are tracking mud and water everywhere," she announced, her voice clear and practical over the sound of the rain. "We must get these wet things off before we catch a chill." "Sir, where might we hang our coats to dry?" Ethan, who was used to simply throwing his own coat over a chair, blinked. He pointed mutely to a row of hooks by the door. Clara nodded her approval and began organizing their outerwear as if she had lived there for years. Meanwhile, the gentle sister, Rose, had noticed Buddy, the dog, cowering in the corner, nervous from the storm and the strangers. She did not approach him quickly. Instead, she knelt down a little ways away and made a soft, clicking sound with her tongue. "Hello, you handsome fellow," she cooed, her voice like a warm blanket. "It is all right. We are all friends here." Buddy's tail gave a hesitant thump on the floor. Ethan watched, amazed. It usually took Buddy weeks to warm up to new people. The youngest, Lila, was already exploring. Her eyes were wide with curiosity as she wandered around the main room, her damp shoes leaving faint footprints. She peered at the framed photographs. On the wall, ran a finger along the mantelpiece and stopped to examine the titles of the few books on his shelf. "You live here all by yourself?" she asked, turning to look at him with an expression of pure, undisguised wonder. "It is so big, and so quiet. Weren't you lonely?" Ethan opened his mouth to answer, to defend his quiet life, but no sound came out. He was saved by Clara. "Lila, do not be rude," Clara said, though her tone was more fond than scolding. She turned to Ethan. "What we all need is something warm to eat. It will settle our nerves. Please point me to your kitchen. I will see what I can manage." Before Ethan could protest that it was not necessary that he had some leftover stew they could heat, Clara was already moving toward the kitchen doorway. He had no choice but to follow. The kitchen, a place he used only for simple meals, was soon filled with a clatter he had never heard before. Clara opened cupboards and drawers with a confident air, finding pots and pans he had forgotten he owned. She filled a large pot with water from the pump and set it on the stove with a firm clang. Rose came in, having made friends with Buddy, who now followed at her heels. "Let me help you, Clara," she said, and began quietly and efficiently gathering vegetables from a basket on the counter. She found a knife and a cutting board and started chopping with a steady, rhythmic sound. Lila leaned against the doorframe, still watching Ethan. "So, do you have any games, cards maybe? After we eat. We will need something to do. The storm does not look like it is planning to stop any time soon." Ethan's plan for the evening had been very simple. He had planned to stoke the fire, drink a single cup of tea, and go to sleep. Now his kitchen was full of people. His dog was betraying him by nuzzling Rose's hand, and someone was asking about card games. The quiet he had craved was gone, replaced by the chop 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 of a knife on wood, the bubbling of water on the stove, the hum of a tune from Rose, and the endless questions from Lila. He was offered at choice. He could retreat into himself, answer in grunts, and wait for the morning to reclaim his solitude. But as he watched the three sisters working together in his kitchen, a strange thing happened. The noise, which had at first felt like an invasion, began to sound less like chaos and more like company. Against his own will, he felt the tight, lonely knot in his chest loosen, just a little. He found himself nodding slowly in answer to Lila's question. "I think there is an old deck of cards in the drawer by the fireplace," he said, his voice rough from lack of use. Lila's face broke into a brilliant smile. "Perfect," she said. "This is going to be fun." Ethan looked from her smiling face to her sisters busy making a meal in his home, and he knew then that his wish for a simple, quiet night was utterly lost. The sisters had well and truly taken over, and for the first time in a very long time, Ethan Cole was not entirely sure that was a bad thing. The simple meal of soup and bread was eaten around the small wooden table in the kitchen. The clatter of spoons and the warmth of the food filled the room with a feeling of comfort that Ethan had not felt in that house since he was a boy. After they finished, Clara insisted on washing the bowls, directing the others to clear the table with a natural authority that no one, not even Ethan, thought to question. The storm continued to rage outside, but the mood inside had shifted from one of frantic escape to one of strange, peaceful shelter. It was Rose who suggested they move into the main room by the fireplace. "It is much cozier in there," she said, in her gentle voice. "We can dry out properly and perhaps share a story or two to pass the time." Ethan, who had not sat in that room for anything other than mending his socks in years, simply nodded and led the way. He built up the fire until the flames danced and crackled, throwing warm, flickering light across the faces of his unexpected guests. The sisters settled onto his old sofa, a piece of furniture that suddenly seemed to have a purpose again, while Ethan took his usual worn armchair. Buddy, now completely won over, curled up contentedly on the rug at Rose's feet. For a few minutes, the only sound was the pop of the burning logs and the relentless drumming of the rain on the roof. It was Rose who broke the comfortable silence. She turned her kind eyes toward Ethan. "This is a wonderful home, Mr. Cole. It feels very strong and safe. Have you lived here your whole life?" Ethan looked into the fire, his calloused hands resting on his knees. He was a man of few words, and his story was not one he shared. But the quiet expectation in the room, the genuine interest on their faces, and the warmth of the fire seemed to loosen something inside him. "I have," he began, his voice a low rumble that matched the thunder outside. "My father built this ranch with his own 2 hands. My mother planted the lilac bush by the porch. I learned to ride a horse in that south field and to mend a fence. Almost before I could read." He spoke slowly, painting a picture of a childhood filled with hard work and family. He told them how his parents had passed on, one after the other, leaving him the land and the responsibility. He spoke of the long days and the peace of the sunsets, of the satisfaction of a harvest brought in, and the worry over a sick animal. His life, which he had always seen as simple and solitary, unfolded in his own words as a story of dedication and quiet love for his land. When he finished, the room was silent again, but it was a respectful, thoughtful silence. The sisters looked at him not with pity, but with understanding. Clara spoke next. "That is a good life," she said, and she sounded like she truly meant it. "A honest life." Then she sighed, looking into the flames. "Our story is a bit different, I am afraid. We have just sold our family home back east. It was full of too many memories after our parents were gone. We felt untethered." Rose picked up the thread, her fingers gently stroking Buddy's fur. "We decided on an adventure. We are driving west to start a new life. We have saved up every penny to open a small flower shop in a city by the ocean. We have always loved growing things." Lila, who had been listening quietly, bounced a little on the sofa, her earlier energy returning. "We are going to call it the 3 Sisters Bloom. Clara will handle the money and tell everyone what to do." Clara shot her a look, but Lila continued undeterred. "Rose will arrange the most beautiful bouquets anyone has ever seen, and I will be in charge of talking to all the customers and making them smile." They talked of their dreams with a passion and excitement that was foreign to Ethan's world, of soil and seasons. They spoke of the scent of roses and lily, of colorful storefronts and busy streets, of building a new family business from the ground up. Their shared hope was a tangible thing in the room, as warm as the fire. Ethan listened, truly listened. He saw not just 3 women who had crashed into his life, but 3 brave sisters, each with their own strengths, bound together by love and loss and a fierce determination to build something beautiful together. Their laughter as they planned. Their future filled the old ranch house, and for the first time, Ethan did not hear it as noise that interrupted his silence. He heard it as music that filled an emptiness he had stopped noticing was there. The lonely feeling in his chest, which had loosened during dinner, now seemed to melt away completely, replaced by a strange and comforting warmth. He was not just hosting strangers. He was sharing his hearth with 3 new friends. The storm finally exhausted itself just before dawn. The furious drumming of rain on the roof softened to a gentle patter and then ceased altogether. The wind's howl faded into a sigh, and an eerie, peaceful quiet settled over the world. Ethan, who had not slept much, heard the change. He had been lying awake in his room, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of other people breathing in his house. The soft murmur of the sisters talking in the room next to his had eventually given way to sleep, but the energy of their presence remained, a vibration in the air that was entirely new. He rose and dressed in the gray pre-dawn light. He moved quietly, starting a pot of coffee on the stove and looking out the window at the damage. The world was soaked and gleaming. Puddles reflected the lightening sky, and the fields shimmered with water. His first thought was for the sisters' car. His second thought was a quiet, surprising pang of disappointment that their leaving was now inevitable. The sisters emerged one by one, drawn by the smell of coffee. They looked rumpled and tired, but in good spirits. Clara immediately began folding blankets and straightening cushions, restoring order to the main room with a few efficient motions. Rose helped Ethan find mugs and set them out on the table. Lila peered out the window, groaning at the sight of the deep, muddy ruts on the road. After a quick breakfast, there was nothing left to do but face the task at hand. Everyone pulled on their boots and jackets and trekked out through the wet, sparkling grass to the roadside where the little blue car sat, looking sad and stranded in the ditch. Ethan assessed the situation with a practiced eye. "The ground is too soft for my truck," he announced. "It will just get stuck, too. We will have to use my horse, Jasper. He is strong and steady." He led the big, patient draft horse from the barn. Clara, to Ethan's surprise, knew exactly how to tie a proper knot to connect the tow rope to the car's frame. She worked with a confident efficiency that earned a nod of respect from the rancher. Rose stood at Jasper's head, speaking to him in a soft, calming voice, keeping him still as the preparations were made. Lila, meanwhile, positioned herself to direct the operation, calling out encouragement to both Ethan and the horse. With a click of Ethan's tongue and a firm command, Jasper leaned into his harness. The muscles in his powerful shoulders and haunches strained. For a terrible second, nothing happened. Then, with a great sucking sound, the car's tires pulled free of the thick mud. Jasper took a few more plodding steps forward, dragging the car safely back onto the solid packed earth of the road. A cheer went up from the three sisters. Lila clapped her hands, Rose let out a relieved laugh, and even Clara allowed herself a proud smile. They brushed the dirt from their hands, their spirits high. The car was inspected. It was muddy, and the front bumper was bent, but the engine, once it was given a moment to dry out, sputtered reluctantly to life. The moment Ethan had been quietly dreading had arrived. The reason for their stay was over. The path was clear. The sisters gathered their now dry belongings from the house and loaded them into the car. The ranch house, which had felt so full and alive just an hour before, began to feel empty again, as if the life were slowly draining out of it. They all stood together by the porch for an awkward moment. The sisters thanked him, their words heartfelt and generous. "We cannot thank you enough for your kindness, Mr. Cole," Clara said, offering a firm handshake. "You saved us from a truly miserable night," Rose added, her smile warm and genuine. "You are a much better poker player than you let on," Lila said, punching him playfully on the arm. "Take care of yourself, okay?" Ethan just nodded, his throat feeling strangely tight. He wanted to say something, to tell them that the night had not been the inconvenience he had thought it would be. He wanted to ask them to stay for one more cup of coffee, but the words stuck somewhere deep inside him, held back by a lifetime of silence. So he just shoved his hands in his pockets and said, "You are welcome. Drive safe." He stood on his porch and watched as they climbed into the car. Rose waved from the passenger window. The engine rattled and the car began to move, slowly navigating the muddy ruts down the long driveway toward the main road. Ethan stood there and watched until the little blue car became a small speck in the distance. He watched until it turned onto the main road and disappeared completely behind a stand of tall pine trees. The sound of its engine was swallowed by the vast, open landscape, leaving behind only the sound of dripping water from the roof and the distant call of a crow. He turned and went back inside. The emptiness of the house rushed to meet him. It was quieter than it had ever been before. The silence was no longer a comfortable old friend. It was a heavy, hollow thing. He looked at the fireplace where they had told their stories, at the table where they had shared a meal, and at the sofa where they had laughed. The lonely feeling that had melted away the night before now returned, colder and sharper than ever. His quiet life had returned to him, and for the first time he understood that it was not peace he had been living in, but solitude, and the distinction felt immense. The day after the sisters left stretched before Ethan, long and empty. The sun rose high and bright, drying the mud and making the whole ranch steam. It was a perfect day for catching up on all the work the storm had delayed. Ethan told himself this was a good thing. He had his routine back. He had his silence back. Everything was exactly as it was before, as it was meant to be. He went through the motions. He fed the horses, their soft nickering the only sound breaking the morning stillness. He mended a section of fence that the wind had shaken loose, the rhythmic pounding of his hammer echoing across the lonely fields. He ate his lunch of bread and cold meat on the porch steps, just like always. Buddy sat beside him, thumping his tail once or twice against the wood. But something was wrong. The quiet felt different. It was not peaceful. It was just quiet. The absence of sound felt heavy and thick, like a blanket that was smothering him instead of keeping him warm. His mind kept wandering from his work. He would be hammering a nail, and suddenly he would hear, not the bang of his hammer, but the memory of Clara's clear, practical voice organizing his kitchen. He would look at the fireplace and not see the cold ashes, but the flickering light on Rose's kind face as she listened to his stories. He would pause while watering the animals and expect to hear Lila's infectious laughter ringing out from the barn. The house itself felt like a stranger. Walking through the door that evening felt wrong. It was too still. He could almost see the ghosts of the previous night everywhere he looked. The rug was slightly crooked where they had pushed. The sofa closer to the fire. A single long strand of red hair, Clara's hair, was caught on the back of the armchair. He found the deck of cards Lila had used still sitting on the small table. A silent reminder of the game he had lost so spectacularly. He tried to make his usual simple dinner, but the process felt hollow. The clatter of his single pot on the stove was a lonely sound. He sat at his table to eat, and the scrape of his chair and his spoon against the bowl were the only noises in the entire world. He missed the clatter of multiple dishes. He missed the hum of someone else's conversation. He even missed the feeling of being gently ordered about. For years, Ethan had believed he was a man who preferred his own company. He had told himself that the solitude of the ranch was its greatest gift. But now he understood a profound and simple truth. There is a vast difference between being alone and being lonely. He had been lonely for a very long time. He just had not had anything to compare it to. The three sisters had been like a burst of color in a world he did not realize had faded to gray. Their brief, bright presence had shown him the shape of the empty space in his life, a space he had carefully ignored. That night, the silence in the house was deafening. It pressed in on him from all sides. He lay in his bed, staring at the ceiling, and the memory of their laughter echoed in the dark, a sound that was more painful than the quiet. He had spent one single evening with them, and it had been enough to completely unravel his contentment. The storm had passed, but it had left behind a different kind of wreckage, one that was not as easy to fix as a muddy car or a broken fence. It had washed away his peace and left a deep, aching loneliness in its place. All he had wanted was for them to leave so he could sleep. Now that they were gone, he found he could not sleep at all. A week drifted by, each day blending into the next under the vast Montana sky. Ethan threw himself into his work with a new intensity, trying to outrun the quiet that now felt so heavy. In his home, he repaired every fence post, cleaned every trough, and organized his tool shed twice. He worked until his muscles ached and he was too tired to notice the silence when he finally went inside. But it was always there, waiting for him. On market day, he hitched his wagon to Jasper and made the slow trip into town. The small cluster of buildings usually felt like a distant, separate world from his ranch, a place he visited for supplies, and not much else. Today, the bustling main street felt louder and more chaotic than ever. He quickly bought his nails and flour and salt, the simple errands that usually took an hour done in half the time. He just wanted to get back to the familiar emptiness of his land. He was walking back to his wagon, his head down, when a voice cut through the noise of the street. It was a voice he had not expected to ever hear again, bright and full of energy. "Mr. Cole, Ethan, over here." He stopped and turned. There, waving enthusiastically from outside the post office, was Lila. Her smile was as wide and brilliant as he remembered. For a moment, he was sure he was imagining things, a trick of his lonely mind. But then he saw Clara and Rose emerge. From the post office behind her, their faces breaking into surprised and genuine smiles when they saw him. His feet carried him toward them, before his mind could even process what was happening. "What are you doing here?" he asked, his voice rough with a confusion that was quickly turning into something like hope. Lila practically bounced on her heels. "Our plans changed. We got to the city, and it was so loud and crowded. The buildings were so tall they blocked out the sun." Clara stepped forward, her manner as direct as ever. "It was not right for us. It was not what we had dreamed of. All we could think about was how beautiful and open it was out here. How the air smelled like rain and earth." Rose's gentle eyes were shining, and we remembered the wildflowers. "The hills near your ranch were covered in them. Lupins and paintbrush and bluebells. We had never seen anything so beautiful." Lila could not contain herself any longer. "So we had a new idea, a better idea. Why drive all the way to a crowded city to sell flowers when the most beautiful flowers and the world are growing right here?" Clara nodded, a businesslike glint in her eye. "Exactly, so we turned the car around. We are going to open our flower shop right here. We just need to find a place for it." The three of them looked at him then, their expressions a mixture of excitement and hopeful expectation. The question hung in the air between them, unspoken but clear. They were asking him if he knew this place, his place. But it felt like they were asking for much more. It felt like an invitation back into the world of noise and laughter and company he had just begun to miss so terribly. Ethan Cole, a man of few words, found them then. He looked from one sister to the next, at their hopeful, determined faces. A feeling, warm and bright, began to push aside the loneliness that had clung to him for a week. He gestured with his head down the street. "I know a place," he said, his voice firmer than it had been in days. "The old building next to the blacksmith. It has been empty for years. The roof might need some patching. It has a good window for showing things off, though." A collective smile spread across their faces. Without another word, Ethan turned and started walking. He did not look back to see if they were following. He knew they were. He could hear their footsteps on the wooden sidewalk behind him, and the sound of their excited whispers was the best sound he had heard all week. He led them down the street, his heart feeling lighter with every step, the lonely rancher becoming a guide, and perhaps something more. The old building next to the blacksmith was exactly as Ethan had described. It was dusty, a little worn down by years of emptiness, and the roof did indeed have a few tiles missing. But to the three sisters it was not a neglected space. It was a blank page, a place of pure potential. They saw past the dust to the strong wooden floors. They saw past the grimy window to the beautiful wide view of the mountains it could frame. Their excitement was a physical thing, filling the empty room as they pointed and planned, their voices bouncing off the walls. Ethan did not just show them the building and leave. He found himself staying. He answered their practical questions about the town, about the weather, about where to find good lumber. The next day, he arrived in the morning with his toolbox and a bundle of fresh-cut wood to patch the roof. It was not a question of if he would help. It simply became what he did. After finishing his own ranch chores, he would come into town and work alongside them. Clara, with her sharp eye and clear vision, was the foreman. She knew exactly how she wanted the space to look, and directed the renovations with unwavering certainty. Ethan found he did not mind taking directions from her. Her ideas were good, and her belief in their dream was powerful. Rose was the heart of the operation. She kept everyone's spirits up. She brought cool water and sandwiches. She could sand a rough piece of wood until it was smooth as silk, and she painted the new sign for the shop with careful, beautiful letters that read "The Three Sisters Bloom." Her quiet hum was a constant, soothing soundtrack to their work. Lila was the burst of energy they all needed. She told jokes that made Ethan laugh out loud, a sound that still surprised him. She was fearless, climbing ladders to hang lights and talking to every person who stopped to peek in the window, already charming the entire town. Weeks passed. The shop transformed. The windows shone, the floors gleamed, and shelves were built to hold vases and pots. The air, once thick with dust, now carried the fresh scent of paint and sawdust, and slowly the sweet fragrance of the first flowers rose arranged. The grand opening was a day the small town would talk about for a long time. It seemed like everyone came to see what the three new sisters and the lonely rancher had built together. The shop was bursting with color and life, and people. Ethan stood off to the side, watching. He watched Clara confidently handle a line of customers. He watched Rose create a beautiful bouquet for the mayor's wife. He watched Lila laugh with a group of children. A deep and solid contentment settled over him. This was not his dream, but he was a part of it. He had helped make it real. That evening, after the last customer had left and the closed sign was turned, the four of them sat together in the middle of the flower shop, surrounded by the lingering scents of roses and soil. They were tired but happy. Clara looked at Ethan, her expression softer than usual. "We could not have done this without you, Ethan," Rose smiled. "You are a part of this now, you know." Lila nudged his shoulder. "Yeah, you are officially our head of building fixing and ladder climbing." Ethan looked around at the shop, at the three sisters, at his own calloused hands that had helped build this beautiful thing. He had lived for so long with a quiet heart, believing that his ranch was his entire world. He had been so wrong. The world was so much bigger, and it was full of people who could become your family if you just opened your door to them. He was not a lonely rancher anymore. He was Ethan Cole, the man who had helped the three sisters build their dream. He was the friend they came to for help. He was the one who now had a place at their table for dinner every Sunday. His ranch was still his home, and he still loved its peace, but now it was often filled with the sound of laughter and talking when the sisters came to visit. The silence was no longer a heavy blanket. It was just a peaceful pause between visits, a quiet moment to remember that he was loved. He had learned that sometimes the best things in life are the ones you never planned for, the ones that arrive in the middle of a storm and change your world forever. The end.